Imagine this. It's the early 1800s. The United States is a young, fragile nation, still trying to find its footing on the world stage. Across the ocean, two titans, Great Britain and France, are locked in the epic Napoleonic Wars. America declares itself neutral, hoping to stay out of the fight and just make some money. American merchants are doing great, selling grain, timber, and cotton to a war-torn Europe. They're the neutral traders, filling a gap and profiting handsomely. But this happy arrangement couldn't last. Britain and France, in their desperate struggle for dominance, started to see America's neutrality not as a right, but as a problem. Britain, with its powerful Royal Navy, began to blockade French ports. Any ship trying to trade with France, including American ones, was at risk of being seized. France retaliated, declaring that any ship that followed British rules would be considered an enemy. Suddenly, American ships were caught in the middle. They were stopped, searched, and their cargo was often confiscated. But there was something even worse happening. Impressment. The British Royal Navy would stop American ships and forcibly kidnap sailors, claiming they were British deserters. Thousands of these sailors were actually American citizens, stolen from their ships and forced into service for a foreign king. This was an outrage, an attack on American sovereignty and lives. The breaking point came in June 1807, just off the coast of Virginia. The British warship HMS Leopard opened fire on the American frigate USS Chesapeake. It wasn't a battle, it was an assault. Several American sailors were killed and 4 were seized. The nation was shocked and furious. The cries for war echoed from Boston to Charleston, but President Thomas Jefferson hesitated. He knew the United States was not ready for a war with the world's greatest naval power. The American army was tiny, the navy was limited, and the country was politically divided. Jefferson feared that a war could shatter the young republic. So, he proposed a radical alternative, something he called peaceable. The idea was bold, maybe even brilliant in theory. Britain and France depended on American goods. What if America just cut them off? Jefferson believed that if the US stopped all trade, the economic pain would force the European powers to respect American neutrality. It was an attempt to wage war with economics, not with cannons. On December 22, 1807, Congress passed the Embargo Act. It was one of the most drastic laws in American history. It banned all American ships from sailing to any foreign port. Exports were completely forbidden. The United States was essentially putting itself under house arrest, sealing its borders from the global economy. Jefferson was given sweeping powers to enforce it, using customs officials in the Navy. At first, there was hope. Jefferson believed the embargo would be a short, sharp shock to the system. But the reality was very different. The first and hardest hit was America itself. In New England, where life revolved around shipping, the economy collapsed almost overnight. Bustling harbors fell silent. Ships rotted at the docks. Sailors, dock workers, and merchants were suddenly jobless. Warehouses were packed with goods that had nowhere to go. The pain spread. In the mid-Atlantic, merchants lost their fortunes. In the South and West, farmers and planters who grew cotton, tobacco, and wheat for export watched prices plummet. With no foreign markets, their crops piled up, unsold. Debt soared across the countryside. Instead of pressuring Europe, the embargo was strangling America's own economy. People don't just sit by while their livelihoods disappear. Smuggling became a massive enterprise. Goods were secretly moved across the Canadian border by night or slipped out of hidden coastal inlets. The government cracked down with even harsher enforcement, expanding federal power in ways that made many Americans deeply uncomfortable. Ironically, Jefferson, the champion of limited government, was now presiding over one of the most intrusive federal policies the nation had ever seen. The political fallout was immense. The Federalist Party, especially strong in New England, called the embargo unconstitutional and tyrannical. They mocked it by spelling it backward, "Oh, grab me," a perfect description of how the government was seizing their property and prosperity. The country grew more divided, not more united. There was one unexpected side effect, though. With British manufactured goods now unavailable, Americans had to start making things for themselves. Small factories and textile mills began to pop up, especially in the North. This was the very beginning of America's Industrial Revolution, a tiny silver lining in a very dark economic cloud. But this small benefit couldn't make up for the widespread disaster. Meanwhile, in Europe, Britain and France just found other sources for their goods. British merchants simply turned to new markets in Latin America and Asia. The economic pressure Jefferson had counted on never really happened. By early 18, facing overwhelming opposition and an economy in ruins, Congress finally gave in. On March 1, 1809, just days before Jefferson left the presidency, the embargo was repealed. It was replaced with a less severe law, but the damage was done. The embargo had failed to change British or French policy. It had deepened the divisions within the United States, and the core issues of impressment and neutral rights were still unresolved. The tensions that led to the embargo only continued to grow. Just 3 years later, America would declare war on Great Britain, starting the War of 1812, the very conflict Jefferson had tried so desperately to avoid. The Embargo Act of 1807 stands as a powerful lesson in history. It was a bold and idealistic experiment in using economic power to achieve political goals. It was a story of good intentions, unintended consequences, and the painful, messy reality of trying to stay neutral in a world at war. If you found this piece of history interesting, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories from the past.